I found out about a secret family vacation without me. Let this selfish celebrate Christmas alone, parents said to my uncle. 2 weeks later they were crying bitterly because I never expected to be cut out of my own family's Christmas, but I should have seen it coming. Looking back, there were signs. My parents had been acting strangely, but I chalked it up to the usual holiday stress. I had no idea they were actively making plans to leave me behind. It all started with their kitchen remodel. Their kitchen was a disaster, outdated, barely functional, and falling apart. I offered to help, not only with my time, but with my own money. $12,000 to be exact. New cabinets, countertops, appliances, and flooring. On top of that, I spent weekend after weekend at their house, installing, painting, and making sure everything was perfect. And they let me. They smiled, thanked me, acted like they appreciated it. But behind my back they were talking about how they were sick of me being there. I didn't find out until my uncle told me. 2 weeks before Christmas, my parents sat him down and said, "Let this selfish man celebrate Christmas alone." They had already booked a trip to Hawaii for themselves, my sister Charlotte, her husband, and their son. I wasn't invited. Worse, they told my uncle not to say a word to me. I was selfish. They said. Me, the one who paid for their dream kitchen, the one who spent his free time making their house look brand new. They were apparently tired of me. If it wasn't for my uncle, I would have been completely blindsided. He couldn't keep it to himself. He called me and told me everything. I wish I had known sooner, before I spent all this money and energy helping them. But what could I do at that point? Demand an invitation? Yell at them? It was clear how they felt. So I kept quiet. I didn't let on that I knew. I put the finishing touches on their kitchen, let them smile in my face, and then watched them fly off to Hawaii without a second thought about me. The only good thing was that I didn't have to spend Christmas alone. My uncle invited me over. We had a great time, just the two of us. A good meal, some whiskey, and a lot of venting. It wasn't the Christmas I had planned, but it was better than pretending to be okay with people who clearly didn't want me around. Then the funniest thing happened. My parents, completely unaware that my uncle was with me, started sending him pictures from their trip. Pictures of them on the beach, drinking cocktails, posing in front of their resort. He showed them to me, and we just sat there laughing at how ridiculous it all was. When they came back, I didn't say a word. No confrontation, no anger, just silence. I decided I was done. But a week later it all blew up. I thought it would be easy to ignore them. I figured if they could pretend I didn't exist over Christmas, I could return the favor. But it didn't take long for things to get weird. First, my mom sent me a casual text, "I hope you had a great Christmas." As if she hadn't just spent the holidays in Hawaii with the rest of the family, while I sat at home, completely cut off. I ignored it. Then my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. A few days later, Charlotte's husband, Ryan, called. This was unexpected. We got along fine, but he wasn't the kind of guy to call randomly. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up the phone. The moment I said hello, I knew something was wrong. "I just want you to know," he said. I didn't approve of what they did. I blinked. "What?" "The trip. Leaving you out. It wasn't my choice." I sat there stunned. I hadn't even considered that Ryan might have had a problem with it. I thought he just went along with whatever Charlotte and my parents wanted. I argued with Charlotte about it before we left. He admitted. She didn't want to hear it. That got my attention. My sister and Ryan hardly ever argued, at least not about family. I thought they were the kind of couple who just got along, even when it was unfair. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said your parents were tired of you coming over all the time," he said. "That you made them feel guilty for taking the trip because you did so much for them." I actually laughed at that. So instead of dealing with their own guilt, they just cut me off completely? Smart. Ryan sighed. That's what I said. But it got worse when we got there. I brought it up again, and your mom lost it. She said they deserved a vacation with no strings attached. Charlotte told me to let it go. I was trying to process everything when Ryan dropped something even heavier. I don't think I can do this anymore, man. That stopped me cold. Do what? This family. The way they treat people. I can't handle it. I sat up straight. Ryan and Charlotte had been married 5 years. They had a child together. And now he was talking like he was done. I thought the drama was just about me, but clearly this went deeper. What happened? I asked. Ryan hesitated. I told Charlotte I'd call you when we got back. She freaked out. Said I was stirring up trouble. So she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She thinks you're the problem, he admitted. Said you were moody about the whole thing and that you punished her by ignoring her. I shook my head. Unbelievable. Then Ryan sighed. Then I knew this isn't just about the trip. It's about who they are. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not sure I can stay married to someone who thinks this is okay. I didn't even know what to say. My sister's husband, the father of her child, was seriously considering leaving because of this. And something told me that was just the beginning. I sat there clutching my phone, trying to process what Ryan had just said. He wasn't just angry. He was questioning his whole marriage. Are you serious? I finally asked. Ryan took a long breath. Yeah, man. I've been thinking about it since we got back. I thought the family drama was about me being left out of Christmas, but now it felt like something bigger was unfolding. Then he said something that really hit me. You don't know the half of it, he murmured. This trip, it was a disaster. I leaned forward. What do you mean? Ryan hesitated, as if he wasn't sure how much to tell me. Then he just let it all out. The first night we got there, your mom and Charlotte got drunk at the hotel bar. No big deal, right? But then your mom starts ranting about you. I sighed. Of course. She went on about how you were too involved in their lives. How they were finally getting a break from you. I clenched my jaw. Wow. That's not even the worst part, Ryan said. She started talking about the kitchen remodel. About how she let you pay for it because she knew you'd expect something in return. That she went along with it because she thought she deserved a new kitchen after dealing with you. I stopped completely. I almost walked out right then, Ryan admitted. I told her it was messed up, and she just laughed it off. Charlotte told me I was overreacting and that it was just the way her family is. That sounded just like my sister. She always covered for her, always made excuses. Then, Ryan continued, the next morning, your dad tries to act like nothing happened. But your mom? She was pissed. I guess Charlotte told her I didn't like what she said. So your mom turned on me. Started telling me how I should be grateful, how I don't contribute enough to this family. I frowned. Wait, what? She went on about how you spent 12 grand on her kitchen and how I never contribute to the family. That's when I lost it. I told her I wasn't going to fund my in-laws when they couldn't even show basic respect to their own son. That explained a lot. My mom doesn't like to be challenged, especially by someone who married into the family. I left, Ryan said. I went for a walk to cool off, and when I came back, Charlotte was furious. She said I had embarrassed her in front of her parents. I shook my head. Unreal. Dude, it got worse, he said. She barely spoke to me for the rest of the trip. She kept saying I ruined Christmas. So what now? I asked. Ryan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I think I'm done. The weight of those words hit me hard. I can't raise my child in a family like this, he said. I don't want him to grow up thinking this is normal. I had no idea what to say. Ryan wasn't just talking about divorce, he was talking about leaving Charlotte, leaving her. And deep down, I didn't blame him. But what I didn't know was that the real explosion hadn't happened yet. It was coming soon, and it was going to tear the family apart. Ryan wasted no time. 2 days after our conversation, he He sat Charlotte down and told her he was done. He wasn't angry. He didn't yell. He just laid it out. He couldn't stay married to someone who defended people who treated others like garbage. He didn't want their son growing up in a family like that, learning that it was normal. Charlotte lost it. She didn't try to understand. She didn't ask what they could do to make things better. She went straight to blaming me. The first thing she did? Call my parents. And just like Ryan predicted, the second they heard the news, they turned everything around and made it my fault. Charlotte called me and screamed that I had poisoned Ryan against her. That I was jealous of her perfect family and had plotted to ruin her marriage. I hung up. I didn't do that. Then my mom called. I ignored her. Then my dad. Straight to voicemail. Then Charlotte texted me, "You got what you wanted. Hope you're happy." It was almost funny. I hadn't done anything, but somehow, in her mind, this was all part of my grand master plan to destroy her life. I thought ignoring them would be the end of it. I was wrong. That night, my parents showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and my mom was yelling, "Are you happy now?" I leaned against the doorframe. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You broke up your sister's marriage." I let out a short laugh. "Oh, really? I did that? You turned Ryan against her. Against us." Before I could answer, someone else did. Ryan. He had followed them over, and the moment he stepped up next to me, he cut in. "No, Mike didn't ruin anything," he said, his voice firm. "This is your fault." My dad turned on him. "Don't talk to my wife like that." Ryan crossed his arms. "Or what?" There was a long, tense silence. My parents weren't used to being challenged, especially by someone who married into the family. They thought Ryan was supposed to be on their side. Then another car pulled up. It was my uncle. As soon as he got out, he shook his head. "Unbelievable." My mom turned to him. "You have no idea what's going on." "Oh, I do," my uncle said. "I know exactly what's going on. You're just mad because Ryan saw through your crap." My parents looked stunned. My uncle had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed out of the drama. They expected him to be neutral. He wasn't. He looked at Ryan. "You're doing the right thing, son." Ryan nodded. "Thanks." That was it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a family argument. This was a turning point. My parents were out of control. Charlotte was about to lose her husband. And for the first time, I wasn't the only one calling them out. But I still didn't know how much worse it was going to get. My parents weren't used to losing. They were the kind of people who always controlled the narrative, always twisted things to make themselves the victims. But this time, it wasn't just me who was fighting back. It was Ryan. It was my uncle. And they hated it. My mom's face turned red. "You're throwing your marriage away because of him?" She spat, pointing at me like I was some kind of disease. Ryan shook his head. "I'm throwing it away because of you." That shut her up. For a second, she just stood there, speechless. Then my dad, trying to save face, scoffed. "Oh, grow up. You're just mad that we went on vacation without him." Ryan let out a sharp laugh. "Is that what you think this is about?" My dad rolled his eyes. "What else would it be?" Ryan turned to my uncle. "You told him, right? What Mom said about Mike?" My uncle crossed his arms. "Oh, I told him. He just doesn't want to admit it." That's when I saw something change in my dad's expression. He knew. He had probably known all along, but instead of being embarrassed or apologetic, he doubled down. "She was joking." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You seriously think it's funny that she bragged about using her own son for money?" Mom jumped back in, arms flailing. "We never used him." Ryan turned to me. "Mike, did they ever offer to pay you back? Even once?" I shook my head. Ryan nodded. "And there it is." It was as if the air had been sucked out of the conversation. My parents had nothing more to say. Then my uncle shook his head in disgust and muttered, "You two are unbelievable." My mom's face fell. "Oh, shut up, Paul." My uncle laughed. Like right in her face. "That's your answer? Shut up, Paul? That's all you've got?" My mom's whole body was shaking now. "You have no idea how much we've done for this family." "Done for them?" My uncle gestured at me and Ryan. "Looks more like you tore them apart." That was the breaking point. My parents weren't winning, and they knew it. So what did they do? The same thing they always did when they didn't get their way. They stormed off. My mom pushed past Ryan and my uncle, dragging my dad behind her. "You're all pathetic," she yelled before slamming the car door. My dad didn't say a word, just climbed into the passenger seat, his face unreadable. As they drove off, the three of us stood in silence. Then my uncle let out a long breath. "Well, this was fun." Ryan rubbed his temples. "I need a drink." We went inside, sat down, and for the first time in years, I felt free. No more begging for their approval. No more guilt. No more games. But just when I thought it was over, things took an even crazier turn. The next morning, Charlotte showed up at my door, bags in hand, mascara streaming down her face. "He left me," she whispered. "Ryan's gone." Charlotte stood in my doorway, looking like she had just crawled out of a war zone. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red, and her suitcase sat next to her like a symbol of total defeat. "He left me," she whispered. "Ryan is gone." I didn't know what she wanted me to say. "Sorry? I told you so?" Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. She plopped down on my couch and stared blankly at the floor. "He packed his bags this morning and said he was done." "Just done?" I sat across from her. "You really didn't see this coming?" She glared at me. "Oh, don't act like you had nothing to do with it." I laughed. "Here we go." She sat up straight and threw her hands in the air. "You turned him against me. You sat there and fed him all these ideas about how horrible my family is." I leaned back. "Your family did that all by themselves." Charlotte took a sharp breath and shook her head. "I have nothing now. My marriage is over, my parents are devastated, and dash." I cut her off. "They're devastated?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean the same parents who cut me out of Christmas? Who called me selfish and told me to celebrate alone?" Charlotte clenched her jaw. "You could have fixed that." I stared at her, completely stunned. What exactly was I supposed to fix? Your husband finally grew a backbone and saw through her bullshit, and somehow that's my fault. She wiped her face aggressively. "Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted." I raised an eyebrow. "What I wanted?" "Charlotte, I wanted a family vacation. Instead, I got thrown out like garbage." "You wanted that. You stood by them when they cut me out. You defended them when they used me for money. You let them run roughshod over me for years. And now that it has finally caught up with you, you want to cry about it." She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her suitcase, got up, and stormed for the door. Before she left, she turned around. "They'll never forgive you for this." I smiled. "Good." As it turned out, Charlotte wasn't lying. After that night, my parents started treating me like their personal nemesis. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I heard from my uncle that they went around telling everyone that I had destroyed our family. That I was bitter and jealous and manipulated Ryan into leaving. They spun the story so hard, you'd think I was holding him hostage at gunpoint, forcing him to file for divorce. But the real kicker? Ryan wasn't done yet. A week later, I got a text from him, selling the cottage. "Want to grab a beer?" I almost spit out my coffee. You see, my parents loved this house. It was a lake house that they had used for years, weekend getaways, summer vacations, even a couple of Christmases. The whole family went up there every year. And guess who owned it? Ryan's. He bought it a few years ago, and since Charlotte was technically a co-owner through marriage, my parents treated it like their own. They never paid for maintenance, never helped with repairs, never contributed a dime, but acted like it was their God-given right to use it whenever they wanted. And now? He sold it. As soon as my parents found out, they lost it. They called Ryan and screamed about how he was ripping away their family traditions. My dad tried to argue that they had invested so much time in the house, as if showing up with coolers of beer and leaving dirty towels everywhere counted as an investment. Ryan shut her down. You don't own it. I do. And I'm done letting you act like you do. My uncle loved it. He called me, barely able to contain his laughter. Oh, they're spiraling. Your mom said, first Mike destroyed our family, and now Ryan is burning the rest of it down. But the best part? My uncle stopped helping them, too. You see, for years he had been the only person in the family who actually knew how to fix things. Every time something broke in their house, he was the one they called. And because he was a decent guy, he helped them. Not anymore. He told them straight out. You treat me like garbage, I don't lift a finger. Suddenly their house started to fall apart. The kitchen I had remodeled for them? They still had a few things to do, but I wasn't going back to do them. The lake house they loved? Soon to be in the hands of a new owner. And just like that, the whole family was at war. Me, Ryan, and my uncle on one side. Charlotte and my parents on the other. Enemies. And honestly, it felt great. Months went by and the war never really ended. My parents still talked about me like I was some kind of villain. Charlotte barely spoke to me, and Ryan moved on with his life, concentrating on his son. The cottage was sold, my uncle never lifted a finger to help my parents again, and their world slowly began to crumble. But then things took a turn I didn't see coming. Charlotte remarried. At first I didn't care. She found a guy a few months after the divorce, rushed into a new marriage, and acted like her life was perfect again. Typical Charlotte move. But then I heard about who she married. A guy named Greg. An alcoholic named Greg. Apparently, Greg wasn't just a heavy drinker, he was a mess. In and out of jobs, always in debt, bad-tempered, and completely unreliable. And then came the real kicker. Greg lost her jewelry. And when I say her jewelry, I mean everything. Charlotte's wedding rings from Ryan, which she had kept for some reason, my mom's old necklaces that she had passed down, even my dad's expensive watch. All gone. No one knows if he pawned it for booze or just lost it in a drunken stupor, but either way, my parents lost their minds. And of course, when disaster struck, who did they run to for help? Me. I got a call from my mom, her voice shaking as she tried to sound humble for the first time in her life. Mike, honey, I know things have been tense, but we really need your help. I almost laughed. Oh, you do? Charlotte's struggling right now. Greg, he's made some mistakes and... I cut her off. Not my problem. Silence. Then she tried the guilt trip. We're still a family. I smiled. Yeah? Where was the energy last Christmas? More silence. Then a sigh. So that's it? You're just cutting us off? I shrugged. Looks that way. I hung up. Later, Ryan called me, dying of laughter. Dude, you're never going to believe this. Oh, I think I might. Charlotte called me and asked for help. This actually surprised me. Wait, after everything? Yep. She asked if I could help her get back on her feet. I whistled. Wow. What did you say? Ryan chuckled. Told her I'd just send money for our son. That's all. I grinned. And? She lost it. Started crying, said she had nothing now. I shook my head. Well, whose fault is that? Ryan sighed. Exactly. And that was it. My parents were stuck with the mess they had made. Charlotte was married to a drunken loser who lost all their valuables. Ryan moved on, just taking care of his kid. My uncle and I? We were fine.